And here we are. And take us through what all this grounding is for to overcome our grief. Do you want Paul to be on it as well?
Paul, do you want to come on the screen, or you said you don't?
I will be just in the background.
Okay.
In a supportive.
Let me know when you want me to play the video, Tami.
Okay. Well, when I talk about the Koji prophecy, you'll see the slide. Thank you.
Sure.
I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
Okay. Thanks, honey. Yeah. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to Grief Mapping, Planet B. And today we're going to, well, let's just start with a nice deep breath. It's the easiest way for our nervous system to reset, especially if our exhalation is longer than our inhalation. So a nice deep inhalation and a really long exhalation. Breathing in all the possibilities of creative action. And breathing out any grief or any trauma that you may have felt from hearing or seeing anything over the last while. And breathing in empowerment and possibilities. And breathing out hopelessness. So thank you. We'll get started. Paul, thank you for sharing the screen. And my partner, Paul, and I are writing a book called Grief Mapping. It's a love story of transformation and resiliency and compassion. And I'll just wait till Paul gets the first slide up for me. This is our 5 stages of grief. And welcome, everyone. And thank you for being here, our convergence of the people 18. So grief mapping was founded out of the understanding that, and how this fits in with our Planet B. Grief mapping was founded out of the understanding that in order to really look at what's going on, to really be able to look and move through the felt sense shock of it and into compassion and then creative action, we need to have enough room in our psyche and our soma and our spirit to be able to grab it and turn it into something magical, something beautiful, something creative. And that's why this book is coming forth. It's going to be a book full of stories, and I call it call and responses from activists and other people that are just part of this movement. And in this first slide, you'll see a gorgeous photo that I took of some elk walking into the water at Jasper National Park. So I'm dedicating this presentation today, and I may cry a bit, to my community of Jasper National Park and to all the animals that have fled the fires over the last few days. The town has pretty much burnt down, a historical mountain town close to where we live, and gorgeous, beautiful energy. And I hear in the news continually about the humans and that they believe they got everybody, even out the backpackers of the back country, out safely, but I haven't heard one mention of the animals. And so this presentation is going out to the animals that have had to flee their home and the hundreds of hectares of fires still burning in Jasper National Park as we speak. Okay. So grief mapping, a love story of compassion, resilience, and transformation. And that's what grief mapping has the potential of doing. And Sailesh has in the signature of a lot of his emails, or all of them, change is inevitable, transformation is intentional. And I believe the energy of grief is inevitable. It's going to come. It's going to be sometimes accumulative, but it can be channeled into creative, transformative action. Okay. The problem is when we have so much accumulated grief, when there's no more room for more loss, what do? How do we transform that piece? I remember after my son passed, and there had been a lot of accumulated grief, and then very quickly after, the father of my children was in a very severe accident. And I remember trying to get out of bed after the service and after his wake and thinking, I don't know how I can do this. And I was basically told from spirit, there's not enough of anything that's going to take the edge off. You have to go right into it. So Charity said earlier, we have to ground our grief. We have to be able to find a way to really allow ourselves to go in it, because if we dance around it, it's just going to create addictions. It's going to create suffering and probably a lot of projections. So at some point, we need to go deep into the grief and allow ourselves to fully feel it. And then we can open up our eyes, hopefully before there's been too much time that's had to pass. And we can really see the gifts in the grief. So with what's going on, I see so many people unable to even talk about it in the non-vegan circles. And it can become something of a way of avoidance. And what we're doing in grief mapping is we're asking people to really go deep into the compassion for themselves and others. So non-duality, it's not them and us. And then move into a place where they can take one creative action, just one creative action. It might be writing an article. It might be writing a letter. It might be doing a food class. Whatever it is, take one creative action to start to move that grief and powerlessness into something that creates change. Okay. So what is grief mapping? By mapping our grief, we make space for it in our psyche and our soul and our spirit. And in that space, the silence becomes possible again. That silence between thoughts that's just so riddled with story that may not serve us. And then out of that silence, we may be able to develop some compassionate inquiry, as Gabor Mate talks about. What is this? Where is it in my soma? Where do I feel this in my body? What does it feel like? What is the texture of it? Can I breathe into it? Can I make a bit of space in it? And then we can take a fresher look at grief as a catalyst for good grief. And grief as our greatest ally. So grief mapping is a guidebook for activists, past, present, and future, a book written in the belief that in the years to come, as the loss becomes inescapable, more and more of us will have to navigate grief's terrain. Okay. This is one of my favorite poems by Rumi, because I think, and this is a piece of art by my dear friend, Jeff Francis. You can see it's called Alternative Nativity. I really especially appreciate this poem by Rumi because so many people are uncomfortable with our grief or with things that aren't, that don't feel comfortable within, that might touch their unresolved grief. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be cleaning you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them all at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So grief must be attended to and hosted. And one of my favorite sayings is, this is one of my paintings, and when we were talking about working through grief, I was healing Crohn's at this time, and I was painting me in this hand tree, knowing that I was held and that I would move through it as a way of moving through accumulated grief, because the bowels store sadness, and I was moving through a lifetime worth of childhood sadness. But what was in the way is the way. So the ability for something to come in our way that flattens us, that makes us feel overwhelmed, what we've really been taught to do in this world is to distract and to get busy and to just get on with it. But if we can go into what's in the way, it will show us what is the way. It's a very powerful understanding. So the age of chaos as clearing medicine, ecology prophecy. So I'm part of a couple other communities, and one of them being a group of women that get together every month on the 22nd of every month and pray for Mother Earth, pray for peace. And many of them gathered together on the solstice of this year in June. And they went and did a trek with the Koji people. And Sailesh is just going to play a little video from their prophecy that was done last year. And I hope it doesn't feel too heavy for anyone, but I think it's a message that we all already know. It's just that it's coming from so much ancient teachings and wisdom, along with the understanding that we really are running out of time. So, thank you, Sailesh.
Of the universe. Throughout all of time, I have never suffered from such heat or exhaustion. I have endured for the last 1,000 years. Since that time, my natural connection points, my rivers, reservoirs, and internal waterways across all continents have been obstructed and are full of pollution. I cannot cleanse or recuperate. In December of 2023, I will start to rise and move and turn, sending this message out to all my children around the world. The storms, the earthquakes, the hurricanes, and the rise of the ocean will come. If the governments, the sultans, the princes, presidents, and kings of the world do not listen and act, in 2 years' time, only 30% of the earth will remain. I am the mother. I have always endured despite arrows being put in my eyes and in my body. I am not seeking to defend myself. I remain calm. But now I must recuperate. There are 2 ways for me to heal. The first, I could take the law of nature into my own hands. This way I will go in search of my medicine so I can cure my body, heal my energies and all that I'm suffering from. There will be great changes upon the earth. You will feel me recovering. You will feel me moving. I will not do this to cause harm to you. It will mean I am recuperating my body. Or the second way, All my children will make the healing happen for me, so I will not need to do it myself. I will put my older children in charge of my recovery. They will go and search for my medicines, for my cure, so I can be healed and recuperate with their help. You, my children, must all be united and deliver what is needed for your older brothers so they can do the healing where I have been injured by you, my younger ones. Each one of the rulers of the world, of the governments of the world, must say, "Yes, Mother, I will stand with you. I will give my help to where you have been injured. I, your mother, have given you everything." When these changes start to happen, we will see whether you listen and act, or whether I myself will have to do what I must to recover the balance on Earth. If in just 6 months from now, by June 2024, you say, "Yes, we will provide what is needed," then my oldest children will be able to help cure my body. If this message is ignored, I will take the law of nature into my own hands, 1.5 years from that date. This is the message that the Mother has given, she who is in the heart of the world.
Thank you, Paul. You can start our PowerPoint again. So no, okay, next slide. So non-duality, what we're being shown right now is that humanity is doing some cleanup before we are able to grow up. And we're seeing this in so many circles, so many people coming together and just cleaning up the residue of their grief and trauma so that they can completely show up. Thanks. And mapping our grief isn't a one size fits all. Everybody grieves in their own unique ways. And we're going to include in this book many biographies of vegan activists who testify to their own unique ways of finding their path into veganism and activism. And there are some recognizable places that everyone's map tends to dance in and out of. Yeah, thank you. So when we look at grief, the most common structure that we've known of grief for many, many years is the Kubler-Ross's stages, which is denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and acceptance. And David Kessler started working with Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and developed the 6th stage of grief with her called finding meaning. So where we first re-examine these stages in the context of expanded grief, that includes grief for animals and the loss of animals and life and habitat and culture. That's what we're doing in this book. It's not just about human grief, grieving humans and maybe companion pets or loss of help, but it's humans that is encompassing eco-grief and what's happening to our ecosystems and the grandchildren of those homes in every part of the world. Yeah, thanks. So why do we deny? So if we're looking at Kubler-Ross's stages, whole industries are set up to obscure and or normalize violence. And as we were able to witness in Julie's presentation, it's taught at the ground level of schools to look the other way. The curriculum does not support really understanding how to get in touch with the earth. And I remember reading what Julie talked about, The Last Child in the Woods, and I couldn't even imagine what it would be like to be disconnected to the planet from planet Earth and being fascinated by trees, because you're as a child being brought up predominantly indoors, you do lose that wonder of life. And so that's what we're doing. We're bringing that back. We're all bringing that back as grandparents and parents. So the bargain of vegetarianism, we heard this a lot throughout the presentation. You know, I'll give up meat if I can keep eating cheese. I buy my food humane. We hear all the bargaining, whether it's meat eater or vegetarian. And you know, Judy Carmen, one of our grandmothers, our Million Vegan grandmothers, said, I wonder if we can say that it was the 70s and the early 80s when the worldwide grief for the animals began to take hold of millions of us. Perhaps we can only take so much in at a time. It took me till the 90s before I allowed myself to see what cows and laying hens endured. That's when I went vegan. So the information is right here, right now, and it's not going to take us 20 years. Time has a way of really, they say speeding up, but I think it's we're in the time space continuum of a humanity awakening very, very quickly. So if we jump into that change, we can release things pretty quickly and take on new paradigms. So we know that angry activism is full of burnout. It eventually will create withdrawal. And it's always about duality. It's always about separation. It's always about them and the other, and it always creates division. So we want to, if we feel angry in our activism, we want to see if we can ground that pretty quickly. And then depression. You know, I can't even convince my own family to become vegan. You know, what chances do I have? And when the industry seems all too powerful, or this is too much, or it's too late. So to depression has often been spoke of when I was a social worker as anger turned inward. And that's not of much value either. Mm-hmm. And here's my great omnipresence. And when acceptance isn't an option. So Sailesh had said when I had talked to him a couple of years ago about writing grief mapping, he said that he felt that the Kubler-Ross's first 5 stages of grief, or her 5 stages of grief, was kind of the springboard that landed into our 5 stages of grief, what we're going to be talking about. But what does acceptance really mean when we're faced with it? And in the context of ongoing loss, acceptance can mean giving up or even selling out, or it can sometimes mean we need to take a pause and ground ourselves into what we already need to process and do lots and lots of self-love and care. But acceptance might also mean finding a way to rest our head in unconditional love, as I have my little friend here doing, my little 4-legged friend. And so the 6th stage of grief from Kessler was finding deeper meaning and using grief as a fuel for purpose. So deeper self-care and compassionate creative action, uncovering repressed trauma to heal it. So finding the meaning that I actually haven't really tapped in much to my grief. I've been dancing around it most of my life, and I've found ways to deflect it. So now it's so accumulated that I need to go into it and really see what I can do with it, and then find a compassionate way through it. Upgrade, it's a way to upgrade our spiritual connection, and it's a way to grow from the loss. And I was in a workshop recently, and Nish said, regression in the service of transcendence is what we're seeing now. So it's a way to look at it when we see that the world is just seems to be behaving so unbelievably de-evolved. We can see it as regression in the service of transcendence. So we're regressing so that we can really, really see what's going on and transcend it, as bizarre as that may sound. So we added our 5 stages to Grief Map. It's the felt sense shock, so we must feel it to heal it. The next stage is to really get deep into our empathy and then into compassion. So empathy is I can feel what's going on, and compassion is I must act. Creative action. So what step can we take, as small or large as we're going to take? It really, really matters to just have a reason to get out of bed. Love and community care. So really taking that love-based focus and grounding ourselves into community care. And then through that, we find pathways to heal and transform. Okay. And we have to feel it to heal it. So that is the thing with grief. I have danced around grief a big part of my life. And it was when I really got flattened with Crohn's, I had to feel it to heal it. And it was transformative. It was one of the greatest gifts I've ever experienced, was going deep into what was going on, into my soma and my psyche and my spirit. And we have all had to deal with grief on that level. And how can we quickly transform it? I don't mean quickly in the time sense, but how can we not build a story that's not going to support us in going forward? Okay. And empathy and compassion. So humans need story. We need story. We're all about story. That's how we pass on lots of information. But what story are we telling ourselves and each other? It's a really good question to ask ourselves. When you ground yourself into whatever we're struggling with in the moment, whether it's our activism and seeing things and hearing things, we can build a story around how terrible humanity is, or we can build a story on how we're waking up and that we're going to be part of that. We're going to be part of that change. So empathy feels and compassion acts, and we are compassionate by nature. We really are. We're compassionate by nature. As Sailesh says, we all have a vegan heart. So creative action, our 3rd step. And as Sailesh said yesterday, one more thing. And it's one more thing. And in that, I like to say one more thing we let go of, and one more thing we're able to bring in. We let go of an old paradigm, an old way. We exhale it. And as Xavier Rudd says, I breathe in the magic of my worth, and I exhale everything I feel I didn't deserve. So creative action can channel the energy of grief into a productive direction. And that's what we're seeing in this convergence every 3 months, is all the creative action that's being channeled into the good. In this, it can be contrasted with the frenzy distraction of the denial stage. And creative action is also sustainable. It's very sustainable, unlike the fast burn of an angry stage, which, we heard Keegan say, anger has fueled him, but has the potential to just light him on fire as well. And creative action gives us purpose and meaning. and gives purpose and meaning to loss. It truly does. I remember my son came 17 days after he died in a dream, and the energy was just live for both of us, Mom. Live more authentically for both of us. And there's so many ways to move into creative action. This is an aerial view of Satna Forest. That was just a complete drought land that is turned into a thriving community. Writing books, documentaries, rewilding, visual art, convergences, sanctuaries, retreats, nonviolent disruption. Yeah. I haven't heard whether or not Captain Paul Watson has been let out of prison. He was imprisoned as he was moving towards doing some nonviolent disruption. Maybe we can talk about that after. Thank you. And our fourth stage is love and community care. So love is such a used word. I'm not going to say an overused word. And what does that mean? And for me, grounding myself into care in the morning has been a really hard thing. I mean, I was really programmed to get out of bed and hit the floor and go to work on some level. It was either taking care of children, and then it went into something else, and then it went into something else. After my son died, I would wake up in the morning and I would start writing a book. But now I have a really deep self-love practice, and I feel really grounded by the end of it. It takes me about an hour and a half, and I'll talk about that further. And then just keeping our thoughts on love, and we can switch them really, really quickly. And Gabriel Cousens talks a lot about before we speak, and I am not always doing this, but I strive to do it. And we are all in the middle of that process of the continuum. But before we say anything, we can ask ourselves, is this going to bring peace? And we may be successful at asking ourselves that question beforehand or not. And community, as we see here, is a way to, it's a way to feel supported. So, somebody once said, are our convergences just preaching to the choir? And Sailesh said, and many of the other, Rebecca and Gabrielle and all of us, Allison, it's like just as much for us, if not more. That's why we have our convergences, because they give us a sense of community care and connection. And that's so important. It's so important in social work. They used to call it the cathartic in the same boat energetics, which gives people a lot of support. It's the basis of 12-step groups. Thank you. Now, and Pathways to Heal is our last stage. And I have a heal protocol that I talk about periodically, and I would love to share down the road. When I was meditating on this convergence, I realized one of my practices, I call it SO now, sowing self-love. So the S stands for sunshine. So they know that scientifically getting light, natural light first thing in the morning is one of the best things we can do, but I do it barefoot. I find a piece of earth. I go out onto the earth, and the O is for oxygen and the W is for water. So I take my liter of infused water or mineralized water. I go out onto the earth, whether it's sunny out or not, barefoot, to get the grounding, to get the earthing. And I breathe deep, exhale fully, and drink my water. I've been doing that all week, faithfully, and it's a game changer. So see if you can find your way of beginning your day that brings in energy and love and connection, deep energy and connection to Mother Earth. Yeah. So there's many organizations that are mobilizing creative action. And again, what's in the way is the way. So look at what's keeping you from doing what you want to do, from being as creative and as loving and as connected to yourself and others. And then really take a look at that, really compassionately inquire into that and say, I see you. I see you. I do. I see you. And then just move right on through it. And, for me, it's art and music and poetry and writing and connecting through media, and a lot of people do it through law. And I love this quote, you know, when you're talking about pathways to heal and transform. And the lived happily ever after was stroked out, and they did the inner work to dismantle the conditioning that created their distorted perceptions and unconscious projections. So that's what we're all doing. We're all just waking up and walking each other home at the same time and lighting the way. I was in a workshop the other day, and Cindy Wigglesworth said, we have to be the sunlight that disinfects. So I love that. Bringing in enough light into any situation will disinfect the toxic energy in a space. And again, I've already talked about the SOS, sunlight, earthing, oxygen, and water. But we don't have any shortage. We don't have any shortage of information. That's the thing. That's what I tell people as a coach. We don't have a shortage of information. We have a shortage of actually implementing it on a regular daily basis. It's our practice. It's our discipline. All of spiritual teachings tell us that. It's our discipline to wake up. And, you know, my friend used to say, get his RPM on, rise, pee, meditate. And so what keeps you from that? What's in the way is the way. So really discover what's in the way and then just move on through it. Say, I see you, and no, I'm moving on through. So our big ask here is please submit your own grief transformed love story. Submit it to myself. I'll put my email in the chat if you don't already have it. But grief mapping is a collaboration of voices. Our ask is for you to share a quote, a story, an essay, and your experience of moving out of maybe the shock into compassion, into creative action, into how you practice love and community care, and into maybe an organization of healing, or maybe what you do specifically. And how we're going to set up these stories at the end of every chapter is a call. I call it a call and release, like Kirtan. So Judy wrote a piece on collateral beauty and shockwaves, and I responded. And so please share your stories or a beautiful quote or an essay that you would like to write, a two-page essay for grief mapping. And we're hoping to have the skeleton of grief mapping completed by the end of this year. Thanks, Paul. You could stop the share. Thank you, everyone. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Well, thank you so much, Tami. The first question I got is, sounds like a thought-provoking book. When do you plan to release it?
Well, it was a thought a couple of years ago to write this book, and it was started, and then it was left for a while, as many projects. Sailesh always has about 18 projects on the go, I'm sure, at once, minimum. And so some things that jump in and take priority, but Paul and I are prioritizing to get the skeleton of this book out by the end of the year. So we're really asking if people want to submit something, if they could do it in the next, let's say, 2 months at the most. Okay. And yeah, that would be great. And if you, are we saving the chat? Like, could people leave their, I will just leave my email. Please email me and I will send you the ask letter that Paul and I wrote. Sure. And I think it's not only thought-provoking, but hopefully it'll be helpful for people to understand that we need to move beyond passive acceptance into actually allowing ourselves to embody a little bit the shock, and then to find ways to move through it as quickly as possible so that it doesn't become our story of immobilization. So a lot of, when you see animals in the wild, seriously, when they have a confrontation, as soon as it's over, they shake it off. They shake their body, right? We freeze. When somebody's not doing something that's confronting us, we go, oh! And we even stop breathing. So pay attention when you're not breathing deep. Pay attention when you're not moving your body, and when you're not moving your thoughts, it means that you're going into some sort of trauma state, and get yourself moving. So hopefully it'll be a book to help people with that. Thanks for putting my email in there.
Sure. Ray?
Hi, my brother from another mother.
Hey, Tami, we've talked about the grief that's involved in being an activist, and I was thinking when you interviewed Anita Krines, and it's interesting to me to see this progression of people from non-vegan to vegan to activist, and there's like a space there that has a lot to do with how one is able to handle grief. The idea that we're going to recognize the suffering of animals and then stop eating them is the first stage. And then the second stage is, do I want to actually engage in the grief of animals beyond just not buying them in the grocery store? And we know there's lots of vegans that are rescuing animals from factory farms, and there's a certain amount of grief that is inherent in the meat industry for human beings, that we sacrifice a section of our society to slaughter animals and pretend that that's their problem. That's not my problem. I'm just eating the animals. But even after we've become vegan, we have a certain number of people that we're sacrificing to the suffering of activism. There is a sacrifice, but this is a self-chosen sacrifice, and I'm fascinated with this idea of grief mapping and how that might help people decide if that's a dangerous place for them to go, or if it's when they get into that space, self-care has become so much more important. There's so many activists that are suffering from burnout, and I think a lot of them don't see it coming. They feel the passion for the animals. They feel like they want to sacrifice themselves, but how do you know how much is too much sacrifice? And I mean, you talk to Anita. How do you feel about this space that I've described? Choosing to introduce grief into your life as an activist. And it doesn't just apply to animal rights activism. It's all activism. Chain yourself to a tree. Get arrested for a cause. Deprive yourself of your freedoms, and Captain Paul Watson's in a jail right now. He's suffering for the animals.
Yeah. So that's a really good point you're making, Ray, is to start out this book letting people know what we're doing is realizing that it's very quick. We can very quickly be overloaded in our, as I say, our psyche, our soma, and our spirit. And I think a lot of people that get into activism, for all different reasons, but sometimes it's like go hard at it before there's even a pause, is where will I fit the best? And sometimes that isn't figured out till later. Like sometimes you go to vigilance and it's like, I have nightmares every night and that's not where I fit. Whereas other people, that's where they fit. And so I think it's really important to start out really taking a pause when we get into this. Like my partner says to me, Paul, says, I can't watch any of that footage. Like I don't need to watch any of that footage. I'm already vegan and it doesn't serve me. And I get that. And we have a right to say that. We have a right to say, what benefit is that to me to watch any more footage? And so I think we really need to have a certain level of self-inquiry and pauses. And that's the problem. Most of us were raised, I mean, I remember going in when my son was little because the teacher wouldn't let him go to the bathroom when he had to go to the bathroom, and how angry I was. And, I think that we're raised to ignore ourselves, and we become very detached from our bodies and our spirits. And so I think it's actually a homecoming. I think grief mapping can be a homecoming. It's like, okay, here we are. We're going in. This is all around us. You know, the forests are burning. The ecosystems are diminishing. You know, the animals are imprisoned. I'll take a pause, really look at, maybe, do I already have accumulated grief, and where will I best fit? Will it be in writing? Will it be in photography of the beautiful landscapes and say, you know, or beautiful animals? There's all kinds of ways, because as many people as there are on the planet, there's probably almost that many ways to be an activist. And I think it's really important for us to take a pause to realize where we would fit into that. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think what you said is very valuable, because there's a lot of activists who do plunge headlong into a community, and the community is going into spaces that you said every once in a while. It's probably constant. You have to constantly be examining your head space, your heart space for this kind of activity. And I appreciate the idea that this is something that a lot of people are never going to be able to engage with. Engaging with people with vegan games, we realize that there's, you know, some people are going to want to play those let's role play, you know, vengeance against the animal systems. Let's try to solve those horrible things that are happening. But we also recognize that there's going to be a huge number of vegans who they just want to celebrate leaving all that behind. Let's role play the utopia, right? Let's look at what the vegan world looks like. And I think that's just as effective as, you know, role playing animal activism and things like that, or for that matter, doing it in real life.
Right. And still maintain a certain level of joy, because we're still alive. You know, we're still alive. You know, as Judy said to me when she was writing the piece for the book, she said, I didn't know how, after everything I've seen, how I would be able to deal with the death of my daughter. I didn't know if I had more room, but I did. And then I think it was sometime around that time that Homo ahimsa came through her.
Mm.
So, you know, it's pretty magical what transformed grief can create, because it's the closest, potentially, if we don't numb out, go into depression, denial, and passively accept, it's the closest sometimes we'll ever be to our heart. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Tami.
Thanks,
Ray. Brian Shutt is asking, is the actual grief map a graphic that each individual creates for themselves, or is it more a list of perspectives and written guidance to be followed?
Yeah, that's really, that's because we're still really in the beginning phases of this book, but we're going to want to get it out sooner than later. Paul talked about graphics as well, and Paul's an artist, so I would love to see different graphics of what just how we would move in and out, but it's also going to be pretty conceptual, and hopefully really heart-centered. So the stages, as we mapped out, are an add-on to Kubler-Ross's, the felt sense shock. So we need to feel it to heal it. We can't just get angry. We just need to go, oh my God, like as you say, Sailesh, it's like, what? I was in school all those, and they were lying to me, like, what? That makes me angry that they're, but we don't want to stay in the anger. And then we move into a compassionate way of being in the world with it all, right? And then the creative action and finding our community and practices of self-love. So I don't know if that answered. Paul, maybe you could answer that one.
I was just going to add, one of the slides that you showed really emphasizes the uniqueness of everyone's journey. And we really wanted to respect that. We're not claiming in this book that everyone goes through every stage of grief in this order. Far from it. and everyone experiences each stage differently. And so one of the things we want to capture is simply the variety of grief and of activist journeys. And my idea was to maybe, provide a little graphic of the map that a particular activist took. So it's not a one size fits all map that everyone can use. It's a very individualized map, which nonetheless contains a few stages that readers will inevitably recognize. One map may be more than another, and hopefully it will allow other readers to make sense of their own grief, to recognize certain parts of a trajectory in one of the maps, let's say, and to think about how their own journey has progressed.
I also want to have quick tips throughout, ways to just get rid of grief. Like I teach people little ways to just move energy out of the body. And there's some yogic moves, there's some Qigong moves, there's kindergarten Qigong, where just for 30 seconds, just shake your body really, really hard, like you're just a bunch of bones, and then just stop in one place and you'll start to feel your energy moving. And that's the thing, Tony Robbins talks about emotion, energy, and motion. And we do need to move energy out of our body. We have to move it out or else it gets stagnant and stuck. So, yeah, thank you.
Dakota?
Hi. Yeah, thanks so much, Tami and Paul. And this has been great conversation. I appreciated that Koji prophecy too. I've heard similar things that I truly believe our dear planet and mother is being as patient as she can with us. Hopefully we can pull this off. But I really I feel validated by what you're sharing. And I think I'm exactly in that place now myself with having finally gone 100% vegan and committed and desiring to do activism, trying to find out, what my particular talents are, where I can be the most effective. But that being said, I've been dealing with still processing, my own life stuff. And I finally quit numbing out and all that. But so all the feelings are coming up. And now I'm just frustrated because I'm like, God, I should have been through this years ago. I could have been I could be like a better activist now if I wasn't still dealing with my own stuff. I'm just like mad at myself, but I'm trying to do it. And I know because I've gotten where I kind of jumped in with both feet and then ignoring my stuff and just wanting to work for the animals. And then it would come up and I'd have little mini blow-ups or problems on the job or whatever. And, so I do have to look at my feelings. I got to look at my grief. I got to feel it like you're saying. And so I'm trying to do that and then find where I can be most effective to help the movement. But just thank you all for your work. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
And no shitting all over yourself, Dakota.
Yeah.
Shitting. No shitting. Just so people know which word I was using. Okay.
Amit?
Thank you very much for the presentation. At first, I couldn't get the relevance of this topic here. I know a little bit of your story, not the entire one. Then I was kind of getting to, do I have that kind of a grief in me? I've lived a really happy life, blessed by all the people surrounding me. I don't have the kind of problems that maybe Tami has faced, or maybe like Dakota was mentioning about, or some other friends of mine who have had a really tough childhood. I was really blessed to be born in a really nice, but then still there was an aspect of grief. The first time I went vegan and I was trying to explain it to my parents and they wouldn't agree to me. Rather, they were constantly telling me all the other stories, how it is a lie and not, which I fell through. And then again, 13 years later, when it came back to me, again, then that was a moment of grief. I was kind of having that hard, like heavy stone on my chest, but nobody could see it. Yeah, it was an invisible stone for others, but for me it was from within. 3 years ago, I left everything. I told my wife, whatever direction you want to go, I'll follow you. And she got us to UK. That gave me a little space. But again, when I started outreaching activities in the UK, in the city center, I used to listen to people, talk to, and obviously there were stories about me being jobless and not leaving everything, a good business in India, a successful businessman, an entrepreneur, and going with his wife. Actually, my wife rescued me from the toxic environment of my own family, of my own parents, because they were failed to understanding me, my emotions, and the reason why I was doing things that I was doing. And then I said, is it really that difficult for people to understand? Just apply a little logic and you'll understand why a cow has milk in her udders. Just apply a little sense to your overall body, use all your senses. And that's how Logic Sense, my company, was born. I said, okay, let me, if what is my mother proud of? What is my father or what is my wife proud about me? Okay, that I'm a successful entrepreneur. How can I channelize, how can I go back to be the version I was, a successful entrepreneur? And then they talking about my activism journey. Today, my wife is really proud. So if anybody is at office and is asking, okay, what does your husband do? Oh, he's a founder of Logic Sense Limited. Okay, what is Logic Sense? So it is about sustainable nutrition. What is sustainable nutrition? Oh, it is about this, how you get your food. Otherwise, whenever my wife asks, okay, what do I tell people? What are you doing? She was speechless. If I talk about veganism, no, there's no career in that. There's no real thing as veganism. There's nothing to be coming out of it. But then I channelized all my knowledge that I had, knowledge of storytelling, knowledge of animation, and all, software development and all. And yes, I see it is shaping up. I see creativity is helping me out. I see the the burden, the stone, I could keep it off thanks to Dr. Sailesh Rao, thanks to you, Tami, as well. I mean, thanks to such calls that I have learned how to channelize my energy and put it to better use. And now I understand grief as well. I mean, it's just so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for this session today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. Yeah, we are trying to help activists become better at what they do, generally.